Welcome to the Motherhood Alliance podcast, the podcast dedicated to empowering moms and families on their health and wellness journey. I'm Brittany Suttner.
And I'm Drea Brit. Together, we're here to explore holistic approaches that go beyond conventional medicine.
Each week, we dive into topics that matter most to you. Everything from nutrition and mental health to alternative therapies and natural living.
And whether you're a new mom navigating the early stages of parenthood or a seasoned pro looking for new ways to support your family's well-being, you're in the right place.
Even better, all of our guests are local small business owners who you can actually talk to and work with. You can learn more about today's guest and connect with hundreds of other health and wellness professionals through our informative and easy-to-use directory at motherhoodalliance.com.
Before we get started, keep in mind that this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for personal healthcare advice. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any changes based on the podcast content.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. Are you ready to help your family thrive? Let's get started. Hi, we are Britt and Drea from motherhoodalliance.com, and we are excited to welcome you to a 4-episode series with Dr. Felicia Houk, the owner of Shifting Tides Chiropractic in Menasha, Wisconsin. Dr. Felicia is a neurologically based chiropractor who specializes in pregnancy, infant and pediatric care, and educating her patients about how stress impacts the way our brains process and function. Her clinic is also a certified Perfect Storm pediatric office that helps children calm their brains and better process the world around them. When she's not serving patients in the office or hosting a local lunch and learn, you can find her traveling, enjoying the outdoors, staying active, and building a life rooted in self-sustainability. Help us welcome her to the podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are excited to kick off our 4th and final episode with Dr. Felicia. I feel like we could definitely hold about 10 more episodes based on just the little pinpricks of information we have already gotten from you. Each one could lead to an entirely new episode. But this one I'm really excited to learn more about because we're going to be talking about something called the perfect storm. And I know that your location, Shifting Tides Chiropractic, is certified in something called the perfect storm. Can you tell us a little bit about what makes your clinic unique, but then also what is the perfect storm?
Yeah. So our chiropractic practice focuses on neurologically based chiropractic or brain-based chiropractic. And our brain is what allows us to live our life. It's it's our operating center. It's how we process information. And it's basically how we respond to the world. So are we responding appropriately or maybe not appropriately? That's all determined by our brain and how it views the world. So the perfect storm and that concept is basically addressing why our kiddos are struggling so much today and really understanding that there's not just one factor or one thing that plays a role. It is a perfect storm. Okay. And so we look at the physical stress, the emotional stress, the chemical stress that is put on a baby in utero and then during birth and after, and looking at how much stress and how soon it occurred, and really understanding the role that that's playing on the brain and how the brain can learn, grow, and develop.
So you're saying all the way from pregnancy, a baby's brain could be starting to feel that fight or flight stimulation, and based on how the birth process goes, it can just start to trigger different things happening within the body based on that stress.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's start with that. Let's start with birth. What would you consider trauma from birth? I mean, obviously people have plenty of birth stories that have trauma involved. But even for someone who has kind of the ideal vaginal birth, is there still trauma involved in that for the baby?
There definitely can be, and especially in settings where you may have a provider of some kind that's assisting. If they're pulling baby in any kind of a way, even to try and get shoulders out or assist, a lot of times that will change the birth outcome. So believe it or not, they did a study, and this is really intriguing. It found that 90% of children born in America, irregardless of whether they had intervention or not, had trauma to their neck or cervical spinal cord.
Whoa.
90%.
So how was that determined? Was that based off of a certain type of scan or just symptoms, or how does that work?
Yep. So in our office, we use both thermography and SEMG. They're two different technologies, but what they do is they measure the inflammation within the spinal cord and how the nerves are actually able to communicate between brain and body. And that's one of our kind of baselines of, I know you asked earlier, like, how do we tell, what are the symptoms to tell if a baby has an issue or not? We go even beyond that and say, hey, don't wait for symptoms to arise. Get baby checked and get a baseline. Because even if it was a wonderful and beautiful birth that went exactly as planned, we just don't know what sort of stressors baby might have picked up from mom's pregnancy, something that might have occurred during birth, and even maybe shortly after. So we always say, get a baseline, don't guess, but get checked.
Well, when you say 90%, that means not pretty much every, but pretty much every, you can just assume that more than likely your baby is holding some stress in their internal system. So is chiropractic care then the answer, or how does a parent help to de-stress their baby from the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and it's not to toot my own horn, but it's literally because we see in society that we're already doing all the other things, right? We're eating clean, mom's eating clean, mom's, we're moving, we're doing therapies when we figure out there's issues. There's all these different things and mechanisms that we're doing. But the one thing that we maybe aren't is looking at the brain and the nervous system. And that is where that neurologically chiropractic comes into play.
So if a family is proactive and they come and see you after baby is born and things are regulated and baby is feeling good, can the perfect storm start from another trigger? I mean, this is kind of like a lifelong storm that can get triggered by multiple different ways of stressors, right? And to make sure I'm understanding correctly, the perfect storm is really just like, okay, stress starts from a certain pinpoint, let's say it's some birth trauma, and then this happens and it adds to the storm. And then this happens and this adds to the storm. And then this happens and adds to the storm. And then baby starts eating solids and then they start eating food dyes and processed foods and that adds to the storm. So is that kind of the concept of what we're talking about here, is a slow build up of stress in the body?
Exactly. Yep. So think of it almost like a pig pile. We're just continuing to build. And there are ways, obviously, like to combat it. And I think one of the best is through that neurologically based chiropractic, because it's simple, easy, and it doesn't require like massive changes, right? Because if the brain is already experiencing stress and then you try to make your kids eat healthy things they don't want. I mean, we're already doing that. It's already a struggle for parents to be like, well, you have to eat your grapes, and your kids are just spitting them out because they can't handle the sensation of the gooiness of the grape because their brain is literally perceiving it as a threat. So it's like it's shut down.
Okay, let's stay on that topic here. You mentioned sensory of a grape, right? And so I do feel like there has been an uptick in sensory, whether it's a diagnosis or just having sensory challenges for a time period. Like my daughter went through a phase where she just could not handle socks in certain ways. What is stemming from that? Are you saying that a lot of these sensory processing challenges are stemming from stress and the nervous system?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what it is. Because sensory processing is the nervous system. So when we're saying, hey, we have a sensation, our body picks up the sensation through your nerve, and it's bringing that message through your nerve, through your spinal cord, and to the brain. The issue is, and as we said, talked about it a little bit before, the issue is that when you're in that fight and flight mode, the information is going to get stopped, if you will, in the primal part of the brain. It's called the amygdala. And that's where we basically pick up on fear and like the bad or the scary, because it's survival. And so we're always going to kick up the survival side, and we're always going to listen to that before we would process it any further. So the information literally gets like stopped at that amygdala, and it won't go into our cortex or our higher level processing from there. And that's why sometimes it's like you're talking to a child or you're talking to somebody, it like goes in one ear and out the other, or they're not even responding at all. And again, that's like the common sign sometimes that kids may have the sensory processing issue is like you're saying their name and they literally cannot hear you. It's because their brain is screaming at them and saying like, run, get away, fight, these kinds of things.
So how much of, if we're talking about sensory processing specifically, how much is ADHD or autism or some other areas DNA based versus like being able to control with the nervous system?
Mm-hmm. So all of that, I mean, it's still a part of this storm, right? So it's not like there's one cause. Okay, it's all of these different stressors. And the thing about genetics is that traditional, hey, I get this from my DNA or I get this from my genes, that concept has been, we'll say, kind of debunked even within genetics and geneticists. That's been debunked for like decades, if you will, because the new study of genetics is called epigenetics. It's how what happens in our environment turns on and off our genes. So it turns on and off how those things are expressed. So we have to look at what's occurring in our environment and those stressors, because that can actually determine whether it's turned on or off.
Okay. So if a kiddo is struggling with some sensory processing things, what you're doing in your environment can help turn down or turn up that intensity.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. And then, that's why they've kind of moved to calling it a spectrum.
Okay. Well, and when I hear the word spectrum, I think of, well, this kiddo is different than this kiddo, which is different than this kiddo. But you're saying there's actually a spectrum that a kid itself, one individual can experience based on the environment around them.
Yeah. I mean, I think they put it in a spectrum because they base it on like a severity level is typically what they're doing. They call it a spectrum because they don't want to say, they don't know how to label it, I guess. And the whole idea of that, of course, is that we don't want to even label or diagnose with those kinds of things anyways, right? We want to understand what's going on in the child and how can we best serve them so they can reach their highest potential, whatever that may be for the kid.
So if a child is in the storm right now, they've had thing upon thing upon thing upon thing, stressor upon stressor upon stressor happening within their lives, and a parent is hearing this concept for the very first time, they're like, okay, what do I do for my kiddo that is in the storm to start bringing them out of it?
Mm-hmm. I would say the first thing, again, tooting my horn, is that the chiropractor that is neurologically based or that is working with this and handling it, getting a baseline of what's going on with your kid. So getting them checked, doing an evaluation and getting a baseline of what's going on, and then having ways to actually measure that improvement for them. So I think that's one of the first and most important things, because chances are, as a parent, you're already probably tried to do all the other things where you're like, hey, we're changing the way we're eating. We're trying to eat better. Hey, we are doing, birth to 3, or we're doing these different, therapies and things like that to try to get them to catch up on their milestones. Well, the neat thing about chiropractic is that while you're doing all those things, and sometimes you can get a gain and then you might lose it just like right after that. What chiropractic does is it literally allows for that like information to not go in one ear and out the other, but to go in one ear and into the brain and get processed. And so what we've been able to see is that once people start with neurologically based chiropractic, all of their therapies, they're going to have these humongous gains, and actually be able to achieve the milestones and keep them, because their brain is now able to process and grow and develop and learn.
And you're based in Menasha, right?
Yep.
Okay. Let's say that somebody is listening to this and they live in somewhere like Madison.
Sure.
If they're looking for a chiropractor, you keep saying neurologically based. So is that something that they would see on somebody's website?
Yes.
If we're talking about a neurologically based chiropractor, do most chiropractors that are neurologically based do the same techniques, or are there certain techniques that are also something parents should be looking for to help their child with this perfect storm?
So we use the technique, it's called torque release technique. And the company that does the Perfect Storm, they're called the Pediatric Experience. So that would be a great website if you're looking to kind of find a doctor. Just go to the Pediatric Experience and they have a find a doctor option. So even if you're not in Wisconsin or you're thinking about it for a family member that's not in Wisconsin, there are Pediatric Experience Perfect Storm chiropractors all over the nation.
So I keep returning to this Perfect Storm because I think a visual is so helpful for families when they are thinking through different concepts. But with this Perfect Storm, I'm guessing you said it starts with birth. It can start with birth trauma. What are some other like big ticket changes happening in a kid's life, or maybe milestones like, I don't know, puberty or certain other milestones when they're younger that parents can really kind of be hyper aware of that could contribute to the Perfect Storm if they're not proactive?
Sure. So that goes back to the physical, the emotional, and the chemical stressors, and I'll just break down some of those. The first one, it can be really, really commonplace in the first year of life that baby gets sick with something and we give them antibiotics right away. Okay, that's something that will forever change the bacteria that is in their body and in their gut. And you cannot ever get that natural amount and the amount, like the variety back, ever.
Let's hit pause there.
Sure.
What should a parent do then instead? If they have a situation where, I mean, it could be as simple as an ear infection, and there are some natural things you can try with ear infections, like garlic drops or things like that first. But for other sicknesses where they're getting prescribed an antibiotic, what else can they do? Or if they have to take it, how can they support their body through it?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that it's very like instant by instance, depending on what is going on. But there are tons and tons of natural remedies that allow for, you know, a better balance of our microbes, right? Of our bacteria or viruses, things like that. So without me saying, hey, do this specifically, because there's so many instances, I would revert back to, you know, going to a natural practitioner, because they are not going to recommend the antibiotic, and they're going to walk you through what it means for your child to have a fever. You know, when is it truly, you know, a concern? You know, what does the science actually say about febrile seizures? What is, you know, so it's being educated and taking the fear away so that we can make educated decisions as opposed to rash, fear-based decision making. And that's going to help to keep, you know, the entire family healthy, and not have those repercussions that then are going to come back to bite you later in the future.
And then, getting back to the Perfect Storm, some other milestones to kind of look out for.
Yep. So I would just say that, you know, when it comes to any kind of symptom that a baby may have, colic is a buzzword, and it's something that a lot of pediatricians will kind of push off and just say, oh, it's normal, they'll grow out of it. The reality is that children never grow out of things, they grow into something else. Okay. So colic is actually one of the first signs, like baby is in pain, they are not happy and something is wrong. So that in and of itself is a great sign to kind of be like, hey, I need to bring them in to neurologically based chiropractor and just get a baseline. What's happening? Because incessant crying is not normal. Other things that we look at as far as like immediate signs is like range of motion. Is baby moving head side to side from left to right, or are they favoring one side or the other? It's a sign that there's restriction, and it's a sign that there's something, you know, going on. And that could be neck, but it also, you know, sometimes we'll see that in like, hey, they're only moving one leg around, or they move one and straighten it out. The other one doesn't straighten all the way, or their arms, or I mean, different things like that. So really, you know, watching baby and observing baby, which mamas do best, of course. But looking at it and going, hey, you know what? I'm noticing this, and I'm actually going to take it to someone that's going to do something and not just tell me it's normal, because I know it isn't, right? And so it's trusting that mama gut, you know, the instincts, and saying, hey, you know what? Something's not right here, and doing something, pursuing it, and being kind of that mama bear. So, you know, that's kind of the physical stressors. How long are we keeping baby in a car seat? I know that is convenient, but the reality is that a car seat puts baby in a position that they can't actually support themselves in. They don't have low back muscles, so they can't actually support themselves in that like inclined position. That's why kids hate car seats. That's why they cry when you get them all strapped in. They don't like it. It's not comfortable. It's there for safety in the car, but as much as you can take them out of that kind of thing and make sure that they're moving and kind of rotating in position. So any kind of baby, carriers, equipment, things like that you may be using, just making sure that baby's happy and comfy and that you're rotating, moving them around. So physical stressors. Emotional stress, obviously we're pretty good at loving on our babies, but, making sure that mom's stress is under control because baby picks up on mom, right? Because we know the impact that like mom's heartbeat has on baby and all these sorts of things. So making sure that you're surrounding yourself with people that are supporting you, loving you, all that kind of thing. And that's especially important in today's world because there are a lot of, single parents and things like that.
And I know that you hold Perfect Storm workshops because obviously we can only cover so much in a quick podcast episode, but you also have workshops where parents could learn a lot more in depth about everything that we've talked about today. So tell us about how often do you hold these workshops? Are they in person or virtual, and who are they for?
Yeah. So right now, typically we'll hold a couple here in the fall and winter season because school has just started back up. So parents are going to be having maybe those first parent-teacher conferences, and that's generally when some of that stuff gets maybe brought up, and that piques parents' interest because they're saying, hey, you know what, maybe my kids do need some extra help, So we'll hold several this fall. We'll hold several in the spring as well, and then we try to hit it pretty hard in the summer because parents and kids tend to have a little more free time, a little less extracurricular. But we hold them all throughout the year because it is important, and we know that there is a very real struggle, and there's just a lot of it. It's everywhere.
Is what you're teaching in this workshop applicable to an adult who feels like they're living in the perfect storm?
Absolutely, because it's going back to that stress concept, like the overwhelm and the frizzle-frazzle. And kids they tend to exhibit the symptoms differently than adults because they're not tied to the same societal norms. So they can have a tantrum. An adult really can't, right? They can run away, right? They like run into the school exits or the classroom exits, like running through the hallways. We can't do that in our work settings. They can hit and they can fight. We can't do that, right? There's repercussion. So adults and children are both experiencing this same thing, and it's stress. But the fact that kids are experiencing it younger, the stress is coming about way earlier than it ever used to. That's why we're having these kind of new labels and diagnoses, and they're just everywhere.
I feel like an adult that would come to that, if they're feeling like I need to learn more about my perfect storm, would have a lot of clarity. Like youth have to think way back, thinking about your birth and your childhood and all that other stuff. I think that would be really good clarity for a lot of adults.
Yes, and we have another opportunity as well. I mean, that one is maybe a little bit more like child-based, but we have another opportunity. It's called Dinner with a Doctor, and that's just something fun that we host. And again, it's usually like every other month or so, but that's an opportunity for more of an adult setting, for people to understand stress and what it does to like impact the brain and the body, the causes of disease, why we are the way we are, all that kind of stuff. So it also provides a lot of clarity and answers, but it's a little bit different, more set for adults.
Yeah, very good.
Well, we will link to your website and your social media and all that jazz in the show notes. But before we completely finish out our four-part series together, I would love to just hear, what does the future hold for Shifting Tides Chiropractic?
Holy moly. Well, there's a lot of things. So we're always looking at, improving our services, understanding how we can get to the root cause and correct it faster. I know that we talked a lot about light therapy, and that's something that I'm really, really into right now because it's something that's not invasive. There's not a chemical. There's not a harm. It's light. It's a beautiful thing. And light gives life. And so I love, the concepts of that. We have some really big goals. Next year, we want to be able to actually get into the schools and into the school systems and provide chiropractic care within the school during the school day to children. And you can imagine that one of my, I don't want to say issues with it, is that once we do it in one district, it's going to take off like rapid fire. And so we're actually looking and kind of on the lookout for pediatric doctors or chiropractors that want to take on,
be part of that.
Be a part of it. Yeah. Because it's amazing. And it's really incredible for them to have that resource just right within the school.
I love that. That would be so great.
I look forward to hearing more how that goes and where that leads to, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. I feel heavily educated after our 4 episodes together, and I think you are just amazing at what you're doing. So thank you for serving our area and beyond with all of your education and serving them through chiropractic and helping us all just live better, healthier lives.
You're welcome. Absolutely.
If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider leaving a rating or review or sharing it directly with a friend who could benefit from the information? We know that you're a busy mom or caregiver, and our goal is to make your life easier by bringing tips and tricks directly from experts into your earbuds. By sharing this episode with someone you love, you can play a critical role in helping to make their life easier as well. We appreciate your time, and thank you for being a part of the Motherhood Alliance family.